YouTube does not like to monetize very many of my videos. These types of videos can take weeks to produce. If you would like to support the channel, please head over to TeeSpring and purchase either a sticker, t-shirt or hoodie from the channel store, link in description. Thank you all so much for your continued support over the years. Now sit back with a good drink, turn off your lights and enjoy the video.
In July 2003, Britain was shaken by the sudden and controversial death of Dr. David Kelly, a renowned chemical weapons expert and former United Nations weapons inspector. Dr. Kelly had been thrust unwillingly into the global spotlight as the whistleblower behind a BBC report alleging that the government had exaggerated intelligence about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, a central claim used to justify the Iraq War. Identified as the source of the report, Dr. Kelly denied being the primary informant but was nonetheless subjected to intense public scrutiny and political pressure. Just days before his death, he endured a grueling public interrogation by a parliamentary committee, where his composure under questioning masked the immense strain he was under. Less than 48 hours after Kelly left his Oxfordshire home for a walk, his body was discovered in Harrow Downhill, a wooded area miles away. His wrists had been slashed, and a partially consumed bottle of painkillers lay nearby. Initial reports claimed he had taken his own life. However, significant anomalies quickly surfaced. No fingerprints were found on the knife allegedly used to cut his wrist, and medical experts questioned whether severing the ulnar artery, a small blood vessel on the side of the wrist, could cause enough blood loss to result in death. Even the knife itself, described as old and blunt, was unlikely to have caused such injuries. Adding to the mystery, his dental records vanished the day he died, and a police helicopter with thermal imaging equipment had failed to detect his body hours earlier. Months before his death, Dr. Kelly had made a chilling prediction. During a conversation with a colleague, he remarked that if Iraq were invaded, he feared he would be found dead in the woods. He also expressed concerns about the government's 45-minute claim regarding Iraq's readiness to deploy weapons, which he believed to be false. This revelation cast further suspicion on his death, especially given his direct knowledge of high-level government actions and his naming of key officials, such as Alistair Campbell, as exerting pressure to sex up the dossier on Iraq's weapons capabilities. The Hutton Inquiry, convened by Prime Minister Tony Blair within hours of Dr. Kelly's death, declared it a suicide, attributing the cause to stress and professional pressure. However, the inquiry, chaired by Lord Hutton, lacked the formal powers of a coroner's inquest. Witnesses were not compelled to testify under oath, and significant evidence, such as medical records and police reports, was either excluded or insufficiently examined. The inquiry's rapid conclusions left many suspicious, particularly as over 20 potential witnesses, including the police officer who discovered Dr. Kelly's body, were not called to testify. Moreover, less than half a day was spent reviewing the medical evidence, leading critics to brand the process a whitewash. Medical professionals, including Dr. Kelly's half-sister, a leading plastic surgeon, and vascular surgeon John Skewer, have since challenged the official findings. They argued that the ulnar artery alone could not produce fatal blood loss and suggested alternative causes, such as a heart attack or external interference, disguised to appear as a suicide. Additionally, Skewer pointed out the improbability of self-inflicted wounds targeting the ulnar artery rather than a more accessible radial artery. The strange details surrounding Dr. Kelly's death, his ominous predictions, the disappearance of his dental records, and the lack of forensic evidence, have fueled speculation that his death may not have been self-inflicted. Was he silenced because of what he knew, or was his death a tragic culmination of immense psychological pressure? The absence of a full coroner's inquest leaves the mystery unresolved, with calls for a more rigorous investigation persisting to this day. Dr. Kelly's case remains one of Britain's most chilling unsolved mysteries, a story of political intrigue, suppressed truths, and unanswered questions. As we delve into the details, his death serves as a stark reminder of the risks faced by those who dare to challenge the powerful.
On February 11, 2002, the body of 40-year-old environmental scientist Dr. Ian Langford was discovered under deeply unsettling circumstances in his Norwich home, a short distance from the University of East Anglia, UEA, where he was a senior fellow at the Centre for Social and Economic Research on the Global Environment, CSERG. The initial press accounts and police statements raised as many questions as they answered, leaving friends, colleagues, and members of the public puzzled, and, in some cases, suspicious, about the exact circumstances surrounding his death. Neighbors reportedly noticed that Dr. Langford's home appeared unusually dark and silent for several days, prompting concerns about his well-being. When police finally entered the property on February 11, they found Dr. Langford deceased. He was naked from the waist down and wedged beneath a chair. The surrounding area appeared blood-spattered, and the rest of the home looked as though it had been ransacked. Early descriptions from those who saw the scene suggested clear signs of disturbance, potentially even a violent struggle. Despite these unsettling details, Norfolk police announced almost immediately that they did not regard the circumstances as suspicious. Their primary statement indicated that the injuries were self-inflicted or accidental, without elaborating on how they reached such a conclusion. No formal murder inquiry was launched, nor did the police provide clarity about the nature of his injuries or the specific findings that pointed to an accident or self-harm. Following a brief post-mortem, the case seemed to be closed, at least officially. A full coroner's inquest, which might have shed more light on the medical and forensic evidence, was never convened. Dr. Langford was, by nearly all accounts, at the pinnacle of a brilliant academic career. He was recognized across Europe for his pioneering work on environmental risk and human health, having contributed to key research on topics ranging from the links between pollution and leukemia, to the spread of infectious diseases in vulnerable populations. He had also advised various international and governmental bodies, lending his expertise to projects that often carried significant policy implications and, by extension, potential political or corporate sensitivities. Notably, he had worked on high-profile studies that examined how cultural perceptions might influence the management, and often the mismanagement, of environmental risks. Colleagues and friends emphasized that Dr. Langford displayed no signs of psychological turmoil or distress. He was admired not only for his intellect but also for his generous spirit. Professor Kerry Turner, his director at CSERG, referred to him as one of the most brilliant colleagues I have ever had. Those closest to him remarked on his upbeat, driven personality, and recalled no evident factors, financial, personal, or professional, that would foreshadow tragedy. What has caused persistent uncertainty are the disturbing details of the scene juxtaposed with the police's swift dismissal of foul play. Conspiracy theories soon circulated, suggesting Dr. Langford might have been targeted because of his research findings. Some posit that he had uncovered inconvenient truths about industrial pollution or disease spread that threatened powerful interests. Others suggest the staging of a chaotic scene to confuse investigators. These theories flourished in part because of the lack of transparency. No inquest meant that crucial information remained out of the public eye, and even Dr. Langford's closest colleagues were left without answers. In the face of mounting speculation, a WEA spokeswoman appealed for people to dismiss any notion of foul play or a cover-up. Describing such theories as completely baseless, she urged that Dr. Langford be allowed to rest in peace and emphasized that the university had nothing to hide regarding the tragedy. Despite these assurances, skeptics note that key details, such as the exact injuries Dr. Langford sustained or the reasoning behind the police's initial conclusions, remain undisclosed. The unusual nature of Dr. Langford's death places it among the list of mysterious scientist fatalities that have generated public intrigue over the years, particularly when the scientist in question worked in a high-stakes or politically sensitive field. An apparent disconnect exists between the official version, that it was either an accident or self-inflicted, and the harrowing initial descriptions of a scene that looked more like a break-in or violent encounter. The absence of a formal inquest has only deepened the sense of uncertainty, giving rise to more conjecture about whether Dr. Langford was in fact a victim of something more sinister, or if, tragically, his end was a bizarre accident. For now, the case sits in a realm of unanswered questions. Dr. Langford's extraordinary contributions to environmental science, along with the deeply peculiar circumstances of his death, ensure that speculation continues. Whether his passing was indeed the result of a tragic, unexplained accident, or whether there was something far darker at play, remains an unresolved question in the minds of many who knew him, worked with him, or have delved into the sparse public record. On the evening of February 9, 2002, a passerby noticed an unsettling figure lying on the icy sidewalk in a residential district of Moscow and alerted local authorities. It was the body of 56-year-old microbiologist Dr. Vladimir Viktor Korsunov, a man whose reputation at the Russian State Medical University spoke of both brilliance and secrecy. When police arrived, they found he had suffered a catastrophic head injury, with early statements suggesting that he had been struck repeatedly with a blunt object. There was no sign of a struggle apart from the immediate vicinity of the body, and nothing appeared to have been stolen from his person, raising questions about the official claim of a street robbery gone wrong. Yet even the initial police report alluded only vaguely to a violent attack, leaving critical details, such as the exact time of death or the circumstances leading up to the incident, unconfirmed. Colleagues of Dr. Korsunov soon learned that he had been returning home from his laboratory, a routine he rarely deviated from, and many of them expressed surprise that a man so set in his ways would find himself in a high-risk situation. Some noted that he had received no threats they were aware of, yet his role as the head of a major microbiology sub-facility had, in their view, inevitably placed him under scrutiny given the sensitive nature of his work. The mystery deepened when the Russian newspaper Pravda reported that Dr. Korsunov had been developing a comprehensive vaccine to protect against known biological weapons, a claim that, if accurate, would carry immense implications for global security. According to statements from undisclosed sources within his university, the project was highly classified, with parts of his research compartmentalized even from those working in adjacent laboratories. Such secrecy, combined with the revolutionary potential of a single vaccine that could neutralize multiple strains of biological agents, offered an unsettling backdrop to the sudden violence that ended his life. Questions also arose about the thoroughness of the investigation, particularly when authorities insisted early on that this was an act of random street crime. No neighbors reported hearing any commotion beyond a few muffled sounds, and although police mentioned that Dr. Korsunov could have been targeted for robbery, they acknowledged that no valuables were missing. Some officials publicly suggested that harsher winters in Moscow had, in recent years, led to an uptick in desperate acts. Critics, however, pointed out that the peculiar nature of Dr. Korsunov's professional work should have prompted a more exhaustive inquiry into possible ulterior motives. In the days following his death, the lab where he led research underwent a brief closure while internal security agents interviewed key staff members and combed through Dr. Korsunov's offices. Colleagues reported being startled by the presence of unidentified officials who arrived without introduction, collected files, and asked only minimal questions about the scientist's personal life. Many of those working closely with him could only speculate about the precise stage his research had reached, noting that he was known for maintaining tight control over his data, often storing key findings in encrypted formats. Speculation that his demise might have been an assassination quickly took hold among those who considered the potential impact of his research. If indeed he was on the verge of creating a single, wide-spectrum vaccine against biological agents, he would have possessed information of immense strategic value, knowledge that could redraw lines of power in the post-Cold War world. Conspiracy theories proliferated, suggesting he could have been targeted by rival nations or perhaps by shadowy elements within Russia concerned about how this medical breakthrough might shift existing deterrent strategies. Suspicion also flared because his death happened during a period that saw several prominent scientists in related fields die under unusual or violent circumstances. Observers noted that many of these researchers had ties to microbiology, bioweapons defense, or other sensitive projects whose broader details remained classified. In Dr. Korsunov's case, such speculation was bolstered by the lack of any substantial evidence that a robbery had taken place, despite the official statements to that effect. Meanwhile, his colleagues at the Russian State Medical University expressed a deep sense of loss, describing him as a driven academic whose ambition was underpinned by a commitment to protecting public health. One junior researcher, interviewed by a local television station, recalled that Dr. Korsunov had once confided, half-jokingly, that the best discovery is one that nobody can weaponize. His untimely death, however, now suggests that some of his unpublished work may never see the light of day, leaving behind lingering questions about both his murderer and the research he left behind. Although authorities continue to dismiss the notion of a covert operation, many remain unconvinced. In the minds of those who understood the high stakes of his research, the possibility that his death was more than a random attack continues to haunt the scientific community. Like other enigmas surrounding the sudden ends of prominent scientists, Dr. Korsunov's fate illuminates the dangerous intersection of innovation and national security, a place where groundbreaking discoveries can not only save lives, but also provoke the kind of secrets and suspicions that may never be conclusively resolved. On the afternoon of March 25, 2002, a small aircraft was seen circling erratically in the skies near Centennial Airport in Colorado before plummeting into a field just short of the runway. The pilot was identified as 63-year-old infectious disease expert Dr. Stephen Mostow, a figure so renowned for his research on influenza and bioterrorism that he had earned the nickname Dr. Flu. Observers at the airport later recalled seeing the plane, believed to be a Piper single-engine aircraft, drop altitude rapidly following what some described as a possible mechanical failure. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, rescue teams converged on the wreckage, finding no survivors. Authorities announced that Dr. Mostow and the passengers on board had been killed on impact, though initial statements offered scant clarity regarding the exact cause of the accident. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, cited pilot error or equipment malfunction as likely factors, yet there was no definitive evidence to confirm either scenario. The airport's control tower logs indicated that Dr. Mostow, an experienced pilot with hundreds of flight hours, had not issued a formal Mayday call, underscoring the suddenness of the incident. Questions emerged almost as quickly as the news of Dr. Mostow's death spread. To the scientific community, he was an integral figure at the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, where he served as an associate dean and spent decades studying infectious diseases. He was well known for his work on influenza pandemics, but his expertise also extended into bioterrorism preparedness. Close colleagues recalled that he had been deeply immersed in projects aimed at helping health systems identify and contain deliberate outbreaks, work that had become even more vital after the attacks of September 11, 2001. Those efforts were said to include advising various federal and state agencies on response protocols, putting him in a position of strategic importance at a time when global tension over biological warfare remained high. In light of his stature in the field, some observers found it difficult to regard his untimely death as merely a tragic accident. While most small plane crashes stem from technical or pilot-related errors, the broader context of Dr. Mostow's research fueled speculation that outside factors could not be ruled out. He was an individual whose knowledge of emerging disease threats and potential countermeasures could have made him invaluable, or, some argued, potentially threatening, to groups or agencies with competing agendas. Informal discussions within academic circles hinted at the possibility of sabotage, though no concrete evidence of tampering ever surfaced. Investigators from the NTSB and local law enforcement scoured the crash site in the days following the incident, looking for signs of mechanical failure such as a damaged propeller or compromised engine components. They also collected Dr. Mostow's flight plan, maintenance records, and communications with air traffic control, hoping to piece together a precise timeline of his final moments in the cockpit. Despite these measures, they stopped short of providing a definitive conclusion, leaving the door open for continued speculation. Official reports reiterated that no immediate proof existed to support foul play, yet they did little to allay the suspicions of those who saw a pattern in the unexplained deaths of other high-profile scientists. Further complicating the narrative was Dr. Mostow's well-documented passion for aviation. Friends mentioned that his love for flying dated back decades, and he often combined his business travel with personal flights whenever possible. Many found it difficult to believe that an individual so seasoned in both science and safety awareness would have been cavalier with flight risks. Some pointed out that, in the months before his death, he had participated in private briefings about potential biological threats, a realm of knowledge that, in theory, could make him a valuable target for covert interests. As tributes poured in from fellow scientists, government officials, and former students, the conversation inevitably circled back to whether the crash might have been part of a larger, unsettling pattern. Dr. Mostow's death took place during a period when a number of researchers linked to virology, microbiology, and national security projects were also dying under abrupt or unexplained circumstances. While investigators consistently found no evidence of criminal activity in these other cases, their frequency raised public doubt. Commentators noted that Dr. Mostow's accident fit uncomfortably into this disturbing timeline, even though every official agency labeled his crash an unfortunate mishap. No matter the speculation, colleagues remembered Dr. Mostow as a dedicated public health crusader who had devoted his life to battling infectious diseases. In their eyes, his tragic loss highlighted a gap that would be difficult to fill, especially considering his near-encyclopedic knowledge of influenza and the looming threat of emerging pandemics. Yet, in the minds of those who track unexplained scientist deaths, the lack of certainty about what happened that day near Centennial Airport remains a persistent source of unease. Whether mechanical failure was indeed the only culprit, or whether something more sinister disrupted that fateful flight, Dr. Mostow's untimely end continues to underscore how precarious the line can be between groundbreaking research and the forces that might seek to contain or exploit it. Late in 2001, word spread that the body of Dr. Vladimir Pasechnik, a high-ranking Soviet bioweapons scientist who had defected to the United Kingdom in 1989, was discovered under unusual circumstances in Wiltshire, England. The official cause of death was reported as a stroke, yet key details, such as the exact date of his passing, remained curiously inconsistent, with some reports stating November 21 and others placing it at December 23. Compounding the confusion was the fact that this announcement came not from local authorities but from Dr. Christopher Davis, a Virginia-based former British intelligence officer who had previously debriefed Pasechnik after his defection. Even in the earliest coverage, questions about timing and context surfaced, given Pasechnik's background and ongoing work. As a top bioweapons expert in the former Soviet Union, he had exposed the vast scope of Soviet research into pathogens like anthrax, plague, and smallpox. After settling in Britain under government protection, he continued his scientific career in microbiology and DNA sequencing, eventually founding a biotechnology firm that focused on developing new alternatives to antibiotics, an area of immense interest amid rising concerns about drug-resistant bacteria and potential biological attacks. In the months leading up to his death, rumors circulated that Pasechnik was involved in a controversial project to exhume victims of the deadly 1919 type A influenza pandemic in an effort to study its genetic structure. This initiative, reportedly announced only 6 weeks before his passing, raised eyebrows given its high-stakes nature and the formidable pathogens it could involve. Observers noted that such research, potentially illuminating how to prevent or weaponize a strain of influenza, could intersect with both public health and national security agendas. Concerns about the official explanation mounted when details remained scarce. Authorities stated that Pasechnik's demise was from natural causes, but they provided little in the way of corroborating medical or investigative evidence. Meanwhile, those aware of his ties to other prominent figures in bioweapons research, notably the U.S. consultant William C. Patrick III, who held patents on methods to concentrate anthrax spores, began to wonder whether Pasechnik's specialized knowledge had placed him at risk. The anthrax attacks that shook the United States earlier in 2001 bore some of the hallmarks of advanced weaponization strategies, and conspiracy theories quickly connected the dots between those events and Pasechnik's background. Friends, colleagues, and former intelligence contacts all attested to the importance of Pasechnik's work, pointing out that, after his defection, his disclosures transformed the West's understanding of the Soviet bioweapons program. In their view, he remained a pivotal voice, both for the historical record and for ongoing research into dangerous pathogens. Yet his sudden, underexplained death occurred precisely at a time when global tension surrounding bioterrorism was at a peak, leading skeptics to claim that vital lines of inquiry were never fully pursued. Neither public records nor any further statements from British authorities have addressed the discrepancies surrounding his reported date of death, nor have they fully explained the absence of a more rigorous investigation. To most officials, the matter appeared closed with the stroke diagnosis, though for many observers, the entire episode seemed too fraught with conspicuous timing and missing details to dismiss outright. In the end, while official sources steadfastly attributed Dr. Vladimir Pasechnik's passing to natural causes, the parallel threads of his significant contributions to Western knowledge of Soviet bioweapons, his cutting-edge biotechnology research, and rumors of his involvement in potentially controversial virus exhumation studies have kept the door open to darker explanations. Much like other mysterious losses in the scientific community, Pasechnik's death continues to invite speculation, overshadowing what might otherwise have been a straightforward account of a scientist succumbing to a fatal illness, and leaving the question of what he could yet have revealed forever unanswered. On the night of November 16, 2001, after a St. Jude's Children's Research Advisory dinner at the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, 57-year-old molecular biologist Dr. Don Wiley stepped away from colleagues in what observers described as a perfectly normal parting. He was seen around midnight in good spirits and, by all accounts, sober enough to drive. Those who knew him remarked that the evening had been pleasant and routine, with no indicators of stress or unusual behavior. In the hours that followed, Dr. Wiley failed to return to his home in Massachusetts. His family and friends grew concerned as dawn broke with no word from him, prompting inquiries that led authorities to search the streets and highways around Memphis. Their fears intensified the next morning when a police officer discovered his rental car on the Hernando de Soto Bridge, which spans the Mississippi River. The car was positioned on the bridge's eastbound lane, sporting a missing right front hubcap and bearing paint marks consistent with the brightly colored construction signs lining certain segments of the bridge. Yet, despite these clues, no official report surfaced of any collision or damaged traffic signs along that stretch of roadway. Investigators initially floated the possibility that Dr. Wiley might have spun out or sideswiped a construction barrier, but the absence of broken plastic, metal debris, or even scuff marks on the surrounding signs muddied the narrative. Compounding the mystery was the fact that, as far as anyone knew, Dr. Wiley had no reason to be on the bridge so late at night, and friends insisted that the notion of him voluntarily harming himself seemed wholly out of character. For nearly a month, the question of Dr. Wiley's whereabouts and well-being remained unanswered. Law enforcement and rescue teams conducted extensive searches along the riverbanks, employing spotlights, helicopters, and patrol boats in an effort to locate the missing scientist. The search continued fruitlessly until December 20th, when a grim discovery was made more than 300 miles downstream, near a hydroelectric plant in Louisiana. Authorities confirmed that a body pulled from the Mississippi River was, in fact, Dr. Wiley. The recovery of his remains only deepened the sense of bewilderment. Investigators documented that the body showed no overt signs of trauma beyond what might be expected from a prolonged immersion in the turbulent waters. Shelby County Medical Examiner O.C. Smith officially attributed Dr. Wiley's death to an accident, arguing that he must have fallen from the bridge sometime after leaving the Peabody Hotel. Smith pointed to the missing hubcap and the paint on the rental car's fender as evidence of a minor collision with construction signs, suggesting that Dr. Wiley may have exited the vehicle or leaned over the railing in disorientation, losing his balance and tumbling into the water below. However, many who were close to Dr. Wiley saw inconsistencies in that theory. Even after the official conclusion was made public, uncertainties remained about which construction signs his car may have allegedly struck, as no damaged or dislodged barriers were ever definitively linked to his vehicle. Friends and family emphasized that Dr. Wiley, known for his meticulous approach to both science and daily life, was the last person they would expect to make a careless misstep, especially on a high bridge over the Mississippi River, in darkness, with no clear motive to stop there in the first place. Such skepticism was further fueled by Dr. Wiley's significant contributions to molecular biology and virology. He had gained international renown through his affiliations with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and Harvard University, focusing on the structural biology of viruses. In a post-9/11 climate, his expertise in pathogens with biodefense implications, particularly deadly contagious viruses, held immense value for both public health and national security. The timing of his disappearance, just weeks after anthrax attacks in the United States had thrown the nation into heightened alert, caused some observers to question whether his death could have been more than a random accident. Nevertheless, official channels maintained that no signs of foul play emerged from the investigation. Dr. Wiley's colleagues, meanwhile, found themselves torn between accepting the accident narrative and their lingering doubts about the ambiguous physical evidence. Many lamented that, whatever truly occurred on the Hernando de Soto Bridge that night, the resulting vacuum of information would forever cast a shadow over his loss. In the years since, discussions around Dr. Wiley's disappearance have rarely been settled by the official conclusions. On the morning of December 10, 2001, a routine welfare check at a secluded farmhouse near Leesburg, Virginia, led to a ghastly discovery. Inside, 57-year-old biophysicist Dr. Robert Schwartz lay dead in a scene so brutal it defied immediate explanation. Investigators noted over 50 stab wounds across his body, inflicted with a 2-foot sword that remained nearby. Even more unsettling was the precise carving of an X on the back of his neck, a detail suggesting the possibility of ritualistic intent. Local authorities struggled to reconcile the horrific nature of this crime with the quiet reputation of the rural community. Friends and colleagues who heard the news were stunned, particularly because Dr. Schwartz's career was defined by rigorous intellect and groundbreaking research rather than conflict or controversy. As a pioneer in DNA sequencing and biometrics, he had contributed to advances with implications for everything from public health to national security. In the days leading up to his death, he had been working on projects that some believed might eventually transform fields like personalized medicine and identity verification. Despite his high-profile scientific endeavors, he lived a largely private life on his farm, content to spend his spare time tending to chores and corresponding with fellow scientists around the globe. Within hours of his body being found, investigators began an intensive search for leads. The savage nature of the attack, so personal and sustained, initially steered authorities towards someone with a deep-seated anger or a possible psychological motive. A break in the case soon arrived when evidence pointed them in an unlikely direction. Dr. Schwartz's own daughter, Clara, a 19-year-old college student who publicly identified as a pagan high priestess. According to friends and classmates, Clara lived partly in a world of fantasy role-playing games, creating storylines where she assigned herself and others various supernatural roles. Rumors circulated that, in one such narrative, she had cast her father as the ultimate villain. Police learned that Clara had enlisted 3 associates to help carry out her plan: Kyle Hulbert, 18, who battled mental health issues, Michael Foale, and Catherine Inglis. Messages and testimony later revealed that Clara had used her role-playing plot to manipulate the trio, framing Dr. Schwartz as an oppressive force who needed to be eliminated. On December 8, under the guise of friendship, Hulbert visited the farmhouse. Neighbors later recalled a brief, uneventful arrival, no shouts or disturbances. Yet by the time Hulbert left, Dr. Schwartz was mortally wounded. His body, found 2 days later, showed evidence of a methodical and ritualistic attack. As investigators delved deeper, they discovered the bizarre nature of Hulbert's ties to Clara and her friends, talk of pagan rituals, dark magic, and a desire to reenact fantasies from their gaming sessions in real life. The meticulously carved X on Dr. Schwartz's neck became a focal point of speculation. Some believed it was a sign that this gruesome killing was intended to mimic or appease some occult narrative. Authorities concluded that, at the very least, it signaled a premeditated, carefully orchestrated murder. While Clara's trial revealed much about her manipulative role in the crime, it also left certain threads dangling. Conspiracy theories emerged, suggesting that Dr. Schwartz's high-level scientific research could have made him a target for more than just a troubled daughter and her associates. He was internationally respected for his work in DNA sequencing and biometrics, fields with major implications for national security and surveillance. Some in the scientific community noted that Dr. Schwartz, like other researchers at the cutting edge, had access to data that could be weaponized or suppressed by powerful interests. Yet the official investigation largely dismissed any larger conspiracy, focusing instead on the dysfunctional group dynamic and Clara's influence. The trials were swift. Clara Schwartz was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 48 years in prison. Kyle Hulbert received a life sentence for wielding the sword that took Dr. Schwartz's life, while Michael Foale and Catherine Inglis faced lesser charges tied to the conspiracy. Still, unsettling questions lingered. The prosecution's narrative established that Clara orchestrated the plot out of personal malice and warped role-play fantasies, but it could not definitively explain every aspect of the staged scene, particularly the ritualistic precision. Nor did it probe whether Dr. Schwartz's ongoing work in biometrics and DNA research factored into his death in any indirect way. Those who knew Dr. Schwartz described him as warm and generous, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. They also expressed disbelief that a man whose passion was unlocking life's most foundational codes, while seeking ways to improve security and health, could meet such a disturbing end at the hands of his own child. Though the official story attributes the murder to a fatal mix of family dysfunction and occult fascination, the specter of deeper motives continues to hover over conversations about this case. Years later, many still wonder if Dr. Schwartz's scientific prominence played any role in his demise, or if the tragedy was simply born of a harrowing collision between fantasy and cold reality. Ultimately, the horrific death of Dr. Robert Schwartz remains an indelible chapter in Virginia's criminal annals, a case that fuses familial betrayal, occult imagery, and an undercurrent of scientific intrigue. Even as Clara and her accomplices served their sentences, the precise reasons for such a calculated act of violence, and whether the X carved into his body pointed to something more ominous, remain questions that haunt those who find the official explanation incomplete. In the summer of 2003, a man known only by the pseudonym Dr. Roger reportedly met a chilling end under circumstances that remained shrouded in secrecy. Dr. Roger, a reclusive geneticist with a shadowy past, was allegedly executed in his Connecticut retirement home, his body removed by a black, government-style vehicle. No public records of his death or even his existence have ever surfaced, leaving behind an unsettling narrative intertwined with decades-old conspiracy theories. The story begins in Roswell, New Mexico, in 1947, where a 17-year-old Roger allegedly witnessed the infamous UFO crash. As the tale goes, he was recruited by the Navy shortly thereafter to assist in the cleanup efforts. This encounter purportedly marked the beginning of his clandestine career in government service. Over the years, Roger became a geneticist, reportedly working at China Lake, a top-secret naval research facility known for its classified experiments. In 1977, while employed by the Navy, Roger confided in a co-worker named Kate. He told her of his involvement with the Roswell crash and his subsequent work in genetics, work he claimed included horrifying experiments that led to the discovery of grotesquely disfigured animals near Groom Lake, a site closely associated with Area 51. According to Kate, Roger was deeply fearful and lived in constant paranoia after sharing his story, believing his knowledge made him a target. After retiring in the late 1990s or early 2000s, Roger resurfaced briefly in early 2002 when Kate encountered him in a San Diego store. Their interaction was brief but unnerving. Roger warned her that speaking to him put her in danger before abruptly leaving. It was the last time she saw him. In 2003, Kate received a phone call from someone claiming to be Roger's friend. The caller informed her that Roger had been executed in his retirement home, his body swiftly removed by unidentified operatives, and the residence sanitized of all evidence. No obituary, death certificate, or official acknowledgement followed. The incident bore the hallmarks of a covert operation, fueling speculation that Roger's knowledge, or perhaps his experiments, posed a threat significant enough to warrant his elimination. The connection to disfigured animals found near Groom Lake adds another layer of intrigue to Roger's story. Kate suspected he had been involved in gruesome genetic experiments during his time at China Lake. Some theorize these experiments might have been linked to extraterrestrial biology, further tying Roger to the murky world of UFO lore and government secrecy. Roger's story is a chilling glimpse into the intersection of conspiracy theories, government black projects, and the fearsome consequences of revealing too much. Whether he was truly a geneticist silenced for his knowledge, a victim of his own paranoia, or part of a larger and darker narrative remains unknown. What is clear is that his tale continues to resonate with those who believe the truth about Roswell, and its far-reaching implications, has yet to be fully revealed. On June 24, 2012, Dr. Shane Todd, a 31-year-old American electrical engineer with expertise in gallium nitride, GaN, technology, was found dead in his Singapore apartment. His death was officially ruled suicide by hanging, but troubling details and his own warnings to family members have cast a long shadow over the case, suggesting something far more sinister. Dr. Todd had been employed by Singapore's Institute of Microelectronics, IME, where he led a team developing GaN, a material with revolutionary applications in both commercial technology and advanced military systems. His work placed him at the crossroads of high-stakes international technology, with potential implications for global security. In the months leading up to his death, Dr. Todd confided in his family that he was being pressured to engage in a collaboration between IME and the Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei. He believed the project involved dual-use technology that could compromise U.S. security interests, describing his situation as one of fear and moral conflict. Concerned about the ethical and security risks of the project, Dr. Todd submitted his resignation to IME in early 2012. He accepted a new position with a Virginia-based technology firm and purchased a ticket to return to the United States on July 1, 2012. Tragically, his body was discovered just days after his last day at IME. His apartment, described as unnervingly pristine, held a note that his family later insisted did not match his writing style or tone. Dr. Todd's family quickly rejected the suicide narrative. They cited his bright future plans, his excitement about returning home, and files found on his external hard drive that detailed a troubling collaboration between IME and Huawei. These files allegedly contained evidence of work that could provide the Chinese military with a technological edge using GaN. Further adding to the mystery, the Singaporean police investigation was marred by inconsistencies. Key pieces of evidence were mishandled, and the Todd family's requests for independent forensic analysis were repeatedly denied. The US FBI offered assistance, but their involvement was limited, and they were not granted access to critical evidence. The Singaporean coroner concluded in July 2013 that Todd's death was suicide, a verdict that satisfied neither his family nor many who followed the case. For conspiracy theorists, the facts point to something far darker, a calculated elimination of a whistleblower who knew too much. His fears of being targeted for refusing to comply with Huawei's demands, combined with his sudden and suspicious death, have left lingering doubts about whether his demise was truly self-inflicted. To this day, Dr. Shane Todd's death remains an open question, raising alarms about the intersection of cutting-edge science, national security, and international intrigue. Was it a tragic suicide? Or did Shane's knowledge and refusal to compromise make him a target in a high-stakes global conflict? The truth, buried behind layers of official narratives and suppressed evidence, may never fully come to light. Dr. Richard Holmes, a 48-year-old weapons expert formerly employed at the UK's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, at Porton Down, was found dead in a field near his home in Salisbury in April 2012. His death was officially ruled a suicide, with the inquest revealing that he had ingested antifreeze. Dr. Holmes had resigned from DSTL in February 2012 amid an investigation into allegations of bullying and gross misconduct. The suspension and impending disciplinary hearing reportedly caused him significant stress, contributing to his depression. His wife, Susan Holmes, testified that he was brokenhearted about leaving the Ministry of Defense, where he had dedicated 26 years of service. Adding to the intrigue, Dr. Holmes had previously collaborated with Dr. David Kelly, a weapons expert whose own death in 2003 was surrounded by controversy and conspiracy theories. Both scientists were connected to Porton Down, a facility known for its secretive research into chemical and biological weapons. The parallels between the deaths of Dr. Holmes and Dr. Kelly have fueled speculation about the true circumstances surrounding their demises. Both were found dead in rural areas under mysterious conditions after facing professional turmoil. These similarities have led some to question whether their deaths were indeed suicides or if more clandestine factors were at play. While the official narrative attributes Dr. Holmes's death to personal and professional stressors leading to suicide, the combination of his high-security work, the nature of his death, and the connection to Dr. Kelly continues to prompt conspiracy theories. The secrecy inherent in their line of work leaves room for doubt and speculation, with some suggesting that these scientists knew too much about sensitive defense projects, potentially making them targets for silencing. In conclusion, the deaths of Dr. Richard Holmes and Dr. David Kelly remain subjects of intrigue and suspicion. The lack of transparency and the sensitive nature of their work at Porton Down contribute to ongoing conspiracy theories questioning the official accounts of their untimely deaths. John P. Wheeler III, a decorated military veteran, high-ranking government official, and key figure in the creation of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, was found dead under baffling circumstances on December 31, 2010. His body, discarded in a Delaware landfill, bore evidence of blunt force trauma, officially labeled a homicide. Yet, the mystery surrounding Wheeler's death and his enigmatic behavior in the days leading up to it suggests a story far deeper and darker than the surface would reveal. Wheeler's life was one of service and privilege. A graduate of West Point, Yale Law School, and Harvard Business School, he held pivotal roles in the Reagan and Bush administrations, advised on matters of national security, and authored a groundbreaking manual discouraging the use of biological weapons. At the time of his death, Wheeler was working as a consultant for MITRE Corporation, specializing in cybersecurity, a field often entangled with covert operations and sensitive state secrets. In the days before his death, Wheeler was seen wandering Wilmington, Delaware, acting strangely and visibly distressed. Surveillance footage captured him in a disheveled state, missing one shoe, as he sought directions to a parking garage. Friends and family later described this behavior as entirely out of character, prompting speculation that he may have been drugged or otherwise coerced. The circumstances surrounding Wheeler's death only deepen the mystery. His body, found in a landfill, had been transported there by a garbage truck. The implication of deliberate disposal, coupled with the absence of any meaningful leads, suggests a calculated effort to obscure the truth. Adding to the intrigue, Wheeler's New Castle home was reportedly vandalized shortly before his death, and a smoke bomb was set off in a neighbor's property. Whether these events were connected remains an open question. Theories about Wheeler's death abound. His work on cybersecurity and his deep knowledge of chemical and biological weapons could have placed him in the crosshairs of powerful entities. Was he silenced because he uncovered something too sensitive to be exposed? Some suggest his death was a sophisticated assassination masked as random violence, a chilling reminder of the high stakes in the shadowy world of national defense. Wheeler's impeccable credentials and prominent career make the lack of resolution all the more suspicious. How could someone so embedded in the machinery of government and security end up discarded in such a brutal and anonymous way? The unanswered questions surrounding his death continue to fuel speculation, leaving many to wonder if his life of service came at a cost no one is willing to admit. His death remains not just a tragedy but a mystery steeped in the shadows of power, secrecy, and conspiracy. Dr. Douglas James Passaro, a 43-year-old epidemiologist and associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, died suddenly on April 18, 2005, in Oak Park, Illinois. His death, shrouded in mystery, remains unexplained, with the Cook County Medical Examiner unable to determine the cause. The enigmatic circumstances surrounding his passing have raised questions about the nature of his work and whether it played a role in his untimely demise. Dr. Passaro was a leading expert in infectious diseases and bioterrorism preparedness, fields deeply intertwined with high-stakes global security. Shortly after the September 11 attacks, he served as the bioterrorism coordinator for the Illinois Department of Public Health, working on responses to the 2001 anthrax incidents. He also led teams in large-scale terrorism simulations, such as TPOF-2, testing governmental readiness for bioterrorism threats. These roles placed him at the forefront of national security and public health, a position fraught with both responsibility and potential risk. Colleagues and students admired his dedication to teaching and his fearless exploration of real-world bioterrorism scenarios. He challenged his students with exercises that blurred the lines between academic inquiry and urgent, practical applications, delving into topics that some might consider dangerously close to sensitive government operations. Passaro's sudden and unexplained death has sparked whispers of foul play. Why would a brilliant and healthy epidemiologist with a promising future abruptly pass away without a known cause? Some speculate that his work in bioterrorism may have exposed him to classified information or dangerous pathogens, potentially making him a target. Adding to the intrigue, Passaro was researching spiral-shaped bacteria linked to stomach diseases, a field with implications for both medical breakthroughs and biosecurity. Was his death the result of an accidental exposure, or could it have been something more deliberate? Those in conspiracy circles point to the risks faced by scientists working in sensitive areas, especially when their research intersects with national defense or global health agendas. Dr. Passaro's death, like others in his field, remains an unsettling reminder of the shadowy intersections between science, security, and secrecy. Whether his demise was a tragic natural event or part of a more complex narrative, the lack of answers leaves his story open to speculation, fueling theories that the truth about his death may be buried deeper than the official reports suggest. On January 7, 2005, the charred remains of Dr. Jeong H. M., a retired University of Missouri protein chemist, were discovered in the trunk of his burning car on the third level of the Maryland Avenue parking garage. The autopsy revealed a horrifying detail. Dr. M had been stabbed multiple times in the chest before his vehicle was set ablaze. The savage nature of the crime and the lack of immediate suspects sent shockwaves through both the academic and local communities. Witnesses reported a person of interest near the scene, a tall male, approximately 6 to 6'2", wearing a painter's or drywall mask. Despite these accounts, leads quickly dried up, and the case became a cold reminder of an unsolved act of violence against a man who had spent his life in the pursuit of scientific discovery. Dr. M was no ordinary academic. A renowned protein chemist, his work had implications for medical and biochemical advancements. He was also known for mentoring students, pushing the boundaries of his field, and contributing to projects with potential high-value applications. Given the brutal nature of his murder, some have speculated whether his death was a random act, or if it was connected to his research and the secrets he might have held. It wasn't until December 2012, nearly 8 years after the murder, that law enforcement linked the crime to Timothy Aaron Hogue, a man with a history of violence who had committed suicide earlier that year. A tip, combined with DNA evidence, tied Hogue to the scene. Reports indicated that Hogue had arrived at the parking garage with a particle mask and returned to a witness's vehicle after the fire, reeking of smoke. The witness, allegedly fearful for their life, waited years before providing critical information. While Hogue's identification offered a resolution of sorts, the explanation of Dr. M's murder still leaves many unanswered questions. What drove Hogue, a man seemingly unconnected to the professor, to commit such a calculated and violent act? Why would someone go to such lengths to cover their tracks, stabbing the victim, transporting the body, and setting the car on fire in a public place? Was this truly a random act of violence, or was there more to Dr. M's work or personal life that is yet to surface? Some conspiracy theorists point to Dr. M's involvement in protein chemistry, a field with significant implications for pharmaceutical development and bioengineering, as a potential motive. Could his research have drawn unwanted attention, or did he hold knowledge that placed him in danger? Others suggest that the violent nature of the crime and the calculated cover-up signal something far more organized than a simple act of rage. The discovery of Hoag's connection to the crime raises as many questions as it answers. Why did it take nearly 8 years for a witness to come forward? What caused Hoag's apparent breakdown, leading to his eventual suicide? And most troubling, why was Dr. M targeted so brutally in the first place? The murder of Dr. Jeong H. M remains an unsettling case, even with an alleged perpetrator identified. The violence, the timing, and the method all hint at a story far more complex than the official narrative suggests, leaving a lingering sense that not all is as it seems. Darwin Kenneth Vest, a world-renowned entomologist and toxinologist, vanished under mysterious circumstances in the early morning hours of June 3, 1999, while walking in downtown Idaho Falls, Idaho. Known for his groundbreaking research into venomous spiders and snakes, particularly the hobo spider, Vest's work had both scientific and medical implications, making his sudden disappearance all the more perplexing, and for some, deeply suspicious. Vest's last known movements were routine yet puzzling in hindsight. On the evening of June 2nd, he had attended a trivia game at the Frosty Gator, followed by a visit to the Golden Crown Lounge. At around midnight, he set off on foot toward his home, a familiar route he had walked many times. By morning, he had vanished without a trace. Despite exhaustive searches and investigations, no substantial evidence ever surfaced, leaving authorities and his family to suspect foul play. Darwin Vest was no ordinary scientist. His independent research into arachnid venoms had earned him international recognition, and his expertise often intersected with fields where science and security collide. Some have speculated that his work could have drawn the attention of entities with vested interests, corporations, governments, or even criminal networks. Could his disappearance have been orchestrated to silence him or exploit his research? The Snake River, a focal point of the search, yielded no clues. While authorities floated the possibility of an accidental fall, many find this theory unconvincing given the absence of evidence. Witnesses reported no signs of distress or erratic behavior from Vest on the night he disappeared, and his meticulous personality makes the idea of an accident seem unlikely. The nature of his work raises deeper questions about whether he may have become a target. Adding to the intrigue, the aftermath of Vest's disappearance saw unusual activity. His name and photos were allegedly used by companies without permission, prompting his family to pursue legal action. Meanwhile, rumors and speculative stories about his fate circulated widely, fueled by the lack of resolution and the enigmatic circumstances of his life and work. Declared legally dead in 2004, Darwin Vest's case remains unsolved, leaving a haunting void in the scientific community and his family. For those attuned to the murky intersection of science and secrecy, his disappearance raises unsettling possibilities. Was Vest a victim of random violence, or did his research, intellect, and independence make him a threat to those operating in the shadows? The unanswered questions surrounding Darwin Vest's fate continue to evoke whispers of conspiracy, a reminder that sometimes, the most brilliant minds can also become the most vulnerable in a world where knowledge and power intertwine.